right, so the next thing we want to do is create a schedule that gives us all this information and calculate out the occupancy load for a restaurant area, if this was our total restaurant area. If we take a look, I have a mass schedule in here already that's kind of calculating out the surface and floor and volume. And we'll go ahead and create a new one so you can see how that works. So to create a schedule, you would go to your View tab, and there's a Schedules pull down. There are multiple types of schedules. We're going to use the Schedules and Quantities. That's going to open up, and we want to choose the category that we want to schedule. So I'm going to come down and just highlight Mass and click OK. All these other settings are fine. You can rename this to Mass OC for occupancy calculations. You can always rename it later. So I'll click OK. And what it does is it's asking me what parameters do I want to schedule. So basically, we want to go ahead and let's get the name. So the type that we talked about before, we'll put that at the top. And that's basically the first column that's going to come down in our little spreadsheet. And then we can come and let's just go ahead and get the gross floor area, the gross surface area, and the gross volume, and click OK. And what that does is it brings out the schedule. So you can see it titles it, and it gives us these column headers, and then it gives us the information below it, which is great. And so the next thing we can do is calculate the totals. So add all that stuff up. So Revit has various different tabs that control how this data is being processed, and one of them is the sorting and grouping. So I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to sort by type name. So this guy. So if I go to the pull down here, it'll say, okay, sort it by type, and it's going to do ascending. So it'll take the bar and put it at the top. And then I'm going to go ahead and calculate grand totals. And I'm just going to make it totals only. And then I'll click OK. And it rearranges it and does all that. And then you're like, well, what just happened? You know, I would like to have totals. But Revit turns off calculations unless you tell it to calculate. It will not calculate. And so what I'm going to do is come in and turn the calculations on in the formatting over here. And in the formatting, I can highlight the parameter that I want to calculate the totals and tell it to calculate totals, right? You can also tell it to justify to the right, right? So if I wanted it to justify to the right, I'll go ahead and pick right here. And I'll do the same thing for the surface area and for the volume. And click OK. So now you can see it pushes all of those over and it justifies the way that we want to. So you can see it calculating out all of that stuff. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to go in and put a calculated value in for the occupancy load. So we're going to use 15 square feet per person for a restaurant occupancy load for this guy. And so let's go ahead and add that occupancy load factor so we can see it, right? So to do that, you would go to the fields where you add parameters, and there is no occupancy load, right? If we scroll down, there is no occupancy load. So we can either add it as a shared parameter, but we can also add it as a project parameter. So there's a little new parameter here, and I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to name this guy occupancy load factor, right? And so it's 15 persons per square foot. So we can come in and change this to an area instead of a number. So I'll change that to an area. And it's going to group it under analysis results, which is like these little headings, which is fine. We'll leave it at that. And we'll just click OK. And we'll click OK. And then we'll come in and I'll just type 15 in here. 15 and 15, right? So it gives us those square footages. And then we want to take this and divide it into our gross floor area, right? So if I go to my fields again and go to edit, And I'm just going to get rid of the surface area. Don't really need it, or the volume for right now. What we can do is we can now add a calculated parameter that will take and do mathematical calculations between the data that we have listed. So if I click on calculated parameter, it will allow me to give it a name. So I'm just going to give it occupancy load. And we want this to be a number, right? It's not going to be square feet. And the formula is going to be, if I click on this guy, gross floor area divided by occupancy load factor. Click OK, and click OK. And then if I click OK, I'm now getting this occupancy load as a number, right? You could do it as an integer, but then it would round down, and oftentimes we want to round up. So we can actually tell it to round up. So if we go back to our filter, our fields, and we pick that occupancy load, and we edit it, we can actually put this in parentheses, right? So it calculates all that out. And then in the front of that parentheses, we can just type round up. And then click OK. And then click OK. And you'll see that it will round up, so you're getting your occupancy load. And then we could go through and total the occupancy load. So I'm going to go to my formatting, pick the occupancy load, and calculate totals, and click OK. So now you're getting the occupancy load for 15 people per square foot for that area. So we talked about variations in how you calculate occupancy load. You can take that into consideration, and if you need any additional help, I'll be happy to do that. So that's the schedule. The next thing we'll do is put things on a sheet and format them visually. So you have sort of a little mass sheet that has the schedule and all that kind of stuff on it.